Now, from the glamorous spot that is Newark Airport as he flies home, we're very appreciative of it. Alan Shipnuck, come in there, loud and clear. Hello.
Hello, happy to be. Hello, Ireland. I'm happy to be here.
What an old timer that was against all odds. It was with a heavy heart I sat down to watch the singles. I wanted something memorable. Jeez.
Well, Sunday got a lot more lively because of the U.S. comeback, but the way the math was, it was never going to happen. I mean, I'm glad that the boys in red, white, and blue made it a little more fun, but this Ryder Cup was over by Saturday evening, and the rest was just kind of entertainment. But fair play to the U.S. team. They showed a little bit of heart and a little bit of determination, but it was just too tall a mountain to climb.
Did you not think for a few, I don't know, for a 10, 15 minute spell there, did you not get a feeling deep down?
No, I mean they were going to have to sweep, the last six matches on the course, and some of them were close, some of them were tied. It just, and of course they put their top players out in the first half of the draw as they had to. So, you're asking Colin Morikawa, who's been playing terrible. You're asking some of these other guys who just didn't have their A game. It was like, it was exciting. There was a lot of energy on the grounds. The crowd was loud. You could see the tension on Luke Donald's face, but it was just the math was not mathing.
So, where do you want to start? There is a lot in this Ryder Cup.
You're the one asking the questions. You tell me.
Okay. Well, we've talked a little bit already on the show about what went so right for Europe. Why did America go into that single seven behind?
There's so many reasons. I wrote a big story about this for Scratch.golf, where I go really deep on this. It's for 30 years, the Americans have been saying, "Oh, they just made more putts than we did," and it's such a simplistic, cop out because you have to be as an athlete, you have to be put in a position to succeed and to play your best. And Europe, because of the continuity from captains to vice captains, because of the backroom staff, because of Dodo Molinari's analytics, which he was really way ahead of the game when he started in Paris, because of the attention to detail, because all Luke Donald does is think about the Ryder Cup, um, because of the leadership they have among the players, which is wholly lacking on the U.S. team. Europe comes into these Ryder Cups optimized. They just have to go play golf. They're confident. I mean, I was telling people on Tuesday, "Oh, Europe's going to win easily," because you could just see the way the guys were carrying themselves. They knew that they were going to win. They had zero doubt. The U.S. was searching for an identity. It was searching for a team leader. It was searching for pairings. This is Ryder Cup week. I mean, Europe had this game plan 6 months ago. And so you take all these factors, and yeah, of course, Europe plays better because it's a better environment, it's a better structure. Um, and so to say, "Oh, they just made more putts than us," we've been saying that for 30 years. And statistically, the American players are just as good as putters over a long time horizon of a PGA Tour, a European Tour season. It's a lot more than that. And so it really comes down to Paul McGinley and Thomas Bjorn, who have been running the European Ryder Cup for decades behind the scenes. Jose Maria Olazabal has been part of the Ryder Cup since before Keegan Bradley was born. And Keegan brought in four vice captains who had never had any leadership role at the Ryder Cup. He was just winging it, and he said in his press conference he was had so much to learn. And he had Jim Furyk, but Jim Furyk's been part of 30 years of losing teams in various roles, and um, it's just a culture of losing for the United States. And the European team is the opposite. They have built this machine that hums along, and they just plug in a few players here and there as needed. Although they really didn't need to plug in many after, you know, bringing 11 of the same guys that won in Rome. So it's a whole structural issue. And the European Ryder Cup team is the same as the European Tour. There's so much collaboration. There's so much cooperation. All year long on the tour events, they pair players together who are on the team or prospective members. The PGA of America, which runs the Ryder Cup, is not the PGA Tour. And so you have this clown show of, part-time guys at the PGA of America who don't really know what they're doing. Every 2 years, you bring in a new captain. They have to reinvent the whole apparatus. Um, they bring in some club pro who becomes president, and he comes up with some crazy idea like, yeah, let's make 65-year-old Tom Watson our captain, even though he knows nobody and is this gruff old school dude who doesn't communicate with his players. Yeah, that's a great idea. Hey, how about Keegan Bradley? He's one of our best players. He's in his 30s. Yeah, sure, let's do it. Like, they're just throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. And there's very little institutional knowledge from Ryder Cup to Ryder Cup on the U.S. side, whereas Europe has. They have Olafable. He has 40 years of knowledge. They have Bjorn. They have McGinley. Now they have Luke Donald. I mean, it's just not a fair fight. And then you look at the specific mistakes. Like the one, arguably, the U.S. had a better roster of ball strikers, top to bottom. So in that case, set up big, bad Bethpage like a U.S. Open. Allow Scotty Scheffler to separate himself with his ball striking. Instead, they presented the most ridiculous cupcake setup. You could hit it anywhere. There was no penalty. You could be 50 yards offline and stick it right next to the flag on these marshmallow greens. And so it just became a putting contest. And if you've been saying for 30 years, well, the Europeans always make more putts than we do, why would you make it a putting contest? It's insane. Like the lack of thinking is just so fundamental. And of course, some of the pairings that Bradley got wrong. And then, no doubt he wanted to bench Colin Morikawa. He wanted to bench Russell Henley. He wanted to bench, Harris English. But because he's a millennial, he's a playing captain, he's got to see these guys every week in the locker room. And Morikawa is a more accomplished player than Keegan Bradley individually. So is Keegan going to bench him and have Colin hate him for the rest of his life? No, the PGA of America put him in an impossible situation. That's why you've always had captains who are not regular tour players who can separate these issues. But by installing a young guy still in his prime, clearly one of the best 12 Americans, they lost a top player and they put Bradley in a position where he couldn't make the tough calls. And so it was just a perfect storm of cock-ups. And, you saw that with the score after 2 days.
Yeah. Oh, it's so interesting. There's so much in it. When you talk there about the institutional knowledge and the culture which has been very much fostered, and it has been fostered in Team Europe, because like the Seve link with today is increasingly distant, but they foster it. And I was listening to Rory McIlroy just this week reminisce about his first Ryder Cup in 2010 at Celtic Manor, where Rory was like, a little bit ambivalent. Ryder Cup, what's it all about?
Yeah, very, yeah.
And his first memory of that week was being in a conference room with the players and that old style, because there was no FaceTime conference call. Speaker was in the middle of the table, and it was a very ill, probably gravely ill, Seve Ballesteros talking to the team. And Rory remembers looking around and seeing a lot of these guys around me are all in tears and having this eureka moment of how big this is and how real this is, and I've misread this whole thing. And so therefore, Rory now, like at his peak in 2025 to Seve in the 80s, like it's a through line, and it's that kind of a narrative and a story they tell themselves, and it's a real thing. And what I was going to ask you was, by comparison, it's a working theory, and the PGA of America point stands massively, but I do wonder, how much damage has Tiger Woods done to Team America in that?
Yeah.
Seve has brought this whole thing together and given them something. And you look at Woods, like not just ambivalent, like indifferent to it, and his Ryder Cup record inexplicably is 13 wins and 21 losses in his matches. He played 80, won 1. Like the defining image of Tiger Woods is not bringing a team together. It's like glaring as Mickelson flares one in 04. And so that team room could never come together. It's got no culture coming together. It's individualistic. I do sometimes think, imagine a sliding doors moment where for Woods, the Ryder Cup had been this huge priority in his career, and he'd sacrificed himself for the team. The contagion effect of that. It's a long point, but I wanted to kind of knit it all together. But I do think, my goodness, Woods could have been just so transformative for this whole thing. Instead, it's like it's still dealing with the after effect of what he brought or didn't bring to the environment.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And Tiger was a lone wolf. He was an introvert. He was awkward. He was not an inspirational figure. And he cared so much about his individual record. You see the emotional vulnerability of the European team. And that's part of why they bond so much, because they're not afraid to hug each other. They're not afraid to cry on each other's shoulder. They're always there for each other in such a profound, sort of beautiful way. Tiger didn't want to show any weakness. He didn't want to say anything in the team room that could be used against him down the stretch at the Masters. And so it was just a calculated decision. And it was also the way he was raised, and it was also his own weirdness. And yeah, he never hid his disdain for Mickelson. So you had these sort of battling factions in the team room. And I don't think that the Europeans ever really loved Colin Montgomery, but 1 week a year, he was their best friend. And I don't think they really loved Nick Faldo, but 1 week, Ryder Cup week, like he was their brother. And they were willing to tear down those walls for each other in a way that Tiger never was. And, Phil kind of tried, but he was always in Tiger's shadow, and he has his own weirdness. And so, yeah, it was 2 decades of American futility. And you know, Sevy's Sevy, but Rory has become this fiery leader. But there was these bridges. It was Poulter. It was Sergio. I mean, Europe's always had these inspirational figures the team could rally around, and they came through with great play. And then it obviously went to Rory and Rom. And who's been the American leader over the last 30 years? I mean, they had these guys in Paul Azinger and Payne Stewart, and they helped turn the tide. I mean, they led the war by the shore. They led the comeback at Brookline. Like these were the guys, and you need those figures. And Scotty Scheffler's a nice dude. Everyone loves Scotty Scheffler, but you need a little spikier personality. You need a little more edge to be the team leader, like a Sergio, like a Poulter, even like Rory. Now he's got that flintiness. And the U.S. is a bunch of nice guys. They have no team leader. Who is their team leader? You can't even identify it. Um, Maybe it could have been Brooks Koepka, but he's in sort of self-imposed exile, and he's his own kind of weird loner dude. Like, it's a fundamental problem. I don't know if it's cultural or it's just this mix of personalities that have come through in the last X number of years, but Team USA has no leader, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Um, the crowd has been much talked about. You've experienced lots of these things. Was this way and above what you've seen previously, or no?
Oh yeah, it was worse. I mean, Brookline was really bad, especially on Sunday. The thing you have to understand, America is a big, huge place. There's very different um, regional behaviors. And so New York fans and Boston fans, everyone knows they're just assholes in every sport: football, basketball, baseball, clearly golf. When the Ryder Cup goes to the Olympic Club in California and San Francisco, it's going to be super chill. Everyone's going to be like way more polite. They'll be cheering, but it's just there's a personality difference in different regions in the U.S. Much like probably in Ireland, Northern Ireland. Like a guy from Limerick might be a little different from a guy from Belfast and whatever. And it's unfortunate that the Boston fans in '99, the New York fans now, they take pride in being, you know, I can't. I can think of impolite words, but I don't want to offend all of Ireland. But yeah, so there is that. Um, Certainly there was some frustration that the team was playing so bad, but Rory made a good point. It wasn't like the fans were out there trying to pump up the Americans that much. They were just hurling abuse at the Europeans. And that's and even so, it's just not clever. It's not witty. you know how many jokes are you going to make about Shane Lowry's weight? Like, I heard thousands of them. It's just the same mindless stuff over and over. And the European fans, they'll take the piss, but it's just more clever, and so you have to laugh. I mean, it was great when the President of the United States, Donald Trump, comes onto the scene, and all the fans and the European fans in the 18th grandstand start, doing the Olay chant. It was just perfect. Like, they could have hurled a bunch of insults at Trump, but they just drowned everything out and with some good cheer. And um, so it was disappointing. I mean, everyone knew that the New York fans were going to be a problem because they're a problem in every sport. It definitely went too far. Um, you could see it on Rory's face Saturday afternoon, and even on Sunday, he was just done. And to take the joy away from from Rory McIlroy when he's winning this Ryder Cup. That was discouraging. And I thought he showed a lot of grace. And his little moments when he started going back at the fans were amazing. And, I think that endeared Rory to me and probably a lot of Americans. Like, heck yeah, like that was cool. And he delivered with his play and with his middle finger and, his F bombs. Like, it's not really what you want in a goodwill exhibition, which is what the Ryder Cup technically is. But I don't blame the Europeans. I mean, they showed heroic restraint, and it's just sad that the U.S. fans live down to their reputation. And I would like to state to all of Ireland that's not how most of us are. We want to watch good golf. We'll cheer for the good shots. It's perfectly fine to have some fun out there, and if Europe misses a big putt to lose the hole, I don't think it's a big deal if the fans cheer. That's not across the line in my mind. This is a competitive arena, and you're rooting for your team. But it was the personal insults, the family insults, that all the profanity. Like, that's just, it doesn't really have a place, not only in golf but in any sport. Like, you take your kid to a baseball game or a basketball game, like, you don't want them to hear that. And I felt bad for a lot of the kids out there in the gallery who had to just, like, they were just, it was just raining down upon them.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered actually so many kids around. Yeah. So we're at 9 of the last 12 for Europe now, and in this competition where we talk about wins away from home being so difficult, Europe are kind of 50-50 for the last 4 away from home. Suddenly, 2012 through to 25, they've won 2, lost 2, which is outstanding. The US haven't won since Watson at the Belfry in 93, which brings us to Adair Manor. Now, JP McManus of Adair Manor often gets what JP McManus wants, and I suspect he wants Tiger Woods versus Luke Donald, and an absolute epic. Tiger turned down, we think, the captaincy for...
Yeah.
So, I talked about the 20 years of his playing experience. He does feel like a slightly different person, more evolved person, a happier person, more generous person than he was for a lot of his playing career. The President's Cup in 19, he seemed to inspire them, Seve style. Is Tiger the captain, do you think, for 2 years' time? Or who will the PGA of America give it to you, maybe?
I mean, if they were smart, shake it up. Like, what they're doing is not working. How about some fresh thinking? Like, bring in a very, sage scribe. Like, obviously, you clearly inspire the European team. Maybe I could do that same for the US.
Sorry to interrupt. I did see you had your customary ask a question in the press conference, and before they answered it, they said, "Well, hang on, you said we wouldn't win one for 2 decades," which it's my favorite part of every Ryder Cup now.
It's unbelievable. Like, talking about that column, the fatal flaw in my reasoning was I didn't factor in how bad the U.S. captains were going to be and give enough credit to this European machine. I was just looking at all this young American talent. You had all the core of Europe was getting old, whether it was Stenson or Westwood or Poulter, and I just looked at that, but I woefully underestimated the structural advantages that Europe had. So hand up, that was my mistake. But what else is Tiger going to do with his life? Competitive golf has been taken away from him. He may play a few senior tour events. I think he likes the idea of winning the Senior Open because which is a USG event. He'll win the US Junior, the US Amateur, the US Open, US Senior. He'd be the first guy to do that. So, there's still some press. I don't think he cares about everyday senior events, but the Senior Open still has some prestige. And yeah, it's the 100th and it's a centennial Ryder Cup going back to its founding in 1927. There's also not an obvious U.S. candidate. Like, who else are you going to call upon? Like, Zach Johnson was a dud. Keegan was a Hail Mary. Phil's still in exile. I mean, what I would like Tiger to do is say, yes, I'll do it, but you have to give me the next 3 captaincies. And he could try and pull a Luke Donald and create some continuity. And Tiger is the only person who has the juice to blow up the Ryder Cup as we know it, create this autonomous body where you don't have the sweater folders from the PGA of America telling the Ryder Cup, how it has to operate. Like, he could actually, he led the task force in 2016, which led to a lot of jokes. In 2015, but it also led to a U.S. victory in 2016. Now, there was also this young generational talent in Koepka and Spieth and Dustin Johnson and Ricky Fowler. That was just one of the best U.S. teams ever. And then as soon as they had some success, they disbanded the task force. They went back to just being rogue administrations, and they started losing Ryder Cups again. They won one in COVID when European fans couldn't travel. That was a weird Ryder Cup, whatever. But um, obviously, Tiger needs, if he takes a job, he needs to say this is how we're going to do it, and he has the gravitas and he has the standing in the game to create a whole new structure. So I hope he does it. I hope he demands multiple terms. And you're right. He's evolved, and his after his car crash, when he was alone in his house playing Call of Duty video games, and this big empty mansion, I think he realized he needs the game more than the game needs him. Everyone just kind of moved on, and so the tour wars between the Live Golf and the PGA Tour gave Tiger a purpose, and you saw how involved he became, joining the board of directors, calling the meeting in Delaware to reshape the whole tour. That gave Tiger an elder statesman role that he probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise, because he's just such a weird loner. But now the tour needed him, and I think he loved that. And so to come in as the savior, to be the guy who changes the Ryder Cup forever, that will obviously appeal to his ego, and I think it gives him something to do. He can't really play much tournament golf. His kids are growing up. Um, how much joy does he get from designing sweaters for his clothing company? And so I think it's just a natural fit. And the JP McManus factor is helpful, because if Tiger's ambivalent, which he clearly was this time around, I think JP can lean on him for the good of the Ryder Cup. Because at what point do we start worrying about if the Ryder Cup even matters? It's always billed as the best event in golf, but is it? There hasn't been a truly exciting Sunday since Medina, 13 years ago. Yesterday, kind of.
Oh, I was excited yesterday. Come on, I was. Oof.
Okay, let me use a better word: suspenseful, because Europe was always going to win. There was no way that America could get 10 points. It was just not going to happen. It's mathematically impossible.
I admire your pessimism. But when it was like 2 matches tied, and oh my God, it was actually on. Or even if they 14 was a disaster. You know what I mean? You guys would have been celebrating. So it felt.
Would we have been celebrating? I mean, a moral victory. That's how bad it's gone for the U.S. Hey, we tied them. This is the country of winners. Oh, we'll take a tie. Yeah, great, we did it. You let them. They kept the cup. We're so excited.
Sure. But a comeback.
Okay,
but you know it's true. As a final thought, because I don't want you to miss your flight. You spent.
I know they're actually boarding me.
Are they? Okay. Well,
final thought.
Very final thought. As I did watch Bryson DeChambeau give it everything, and then even on Saturday night take to the putting green to give it more, and then when he was 4 down to Matt Fitzpatrick and should have just said I'm done, to fight back. And as I watched Scotty Scheffler in tears when he talked about the team picking me up the night before, and they didn't turn on each other, kind of 2014 style, I did think to myself, the old trope that these players or the locker room just don't care is not true. There's still something there. They do care about it. With as your point, we got to do something to this tournament. I felt they really cared.
They cared the week of the Ryder Cup. There's no question. And they've always cared, even when they were getting blown out, in Wales or whatever. They care when they get there. These guys have pride. If there's a golf ball in front of them, they want to hit a great shot every time. That's how they're wired. So it's never not they don't care the week of the Ryder Cup. But what about the other, 103 weeks in between, while Europe is building camaraderie, while they're playing practice rounds together, while they're thinking of every little advantage? Rory set the tone for this Ryder Cup 2 years ago when he pounded on the table and said, "We're going to win in Bethpage." And that set this whole tone, and that showed how much he wanted this. And he's talked about the glory of a road win ever since. And he planted this seed in his teammates. How much have you heard Scotty Scheffler talk about the Ryder Cup in the last 2 years?
I think he declined questions.
Yeah.
A while back. Yeah.
So it takes more buy-in. They've got to start caring now. You can't wait until you show up in Ireland in 103 weeks. And the Europeans care, and they do everything they can. They have this backroom staff. They have Bjorn and McGinley always thinking about it. Luke Donald, he's brushing his teeth every night. He's thinking about little ways. And we don't even know who our next captain is.
That's why a Tiger. It's got to be Tiger. It just has to.
Does,
he's the guy to transform it.
Yeah. So it's not an issue of caring in the moment. It's investing in the process.
Fair.
And there's been no investment by the United States team or players from Ryder Cup to Ryder Cup, and that has to change, or it's just going to be the same old story.
Very fair. Um, please don't miss your flight. Thank you so much for dialing in. We really appreciate it, Alan Shipnuck. When's this Rory book due out again? I had a lot of emails about that.
Yeah, it's coming out in March, and I'm on the last chapter now. It's a really fun book. I'm really happy with it. I think y'all are gonna love it, and this was a great final chapter. That this was even the emotion that Rory showed in the press conference. This is Rory in full, and it was messy. It was beautiful. It was emotional. He played great. He ran out of gas. Like this was his entire life and career in 1 week. And I came here needing an ending to the book, and I found it.
Wow.
So I'm delighted.
Okay, class. Alan Shipnuck, big pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's always great talking to you. Thank you, Joe. Okay, bye.